Hi guys, it's Lauren and welcome back to my channel. And in this video, I'm going to be telling you guys about the death row granny. So without further ado, let's get into the video. Margie Velma Barfield was born October 29th, 1932. She lived in an unpainted house, and half of the sources I used said she lived in North Carolina and the other half said South Carolina. It was like 50-50. So she lived in one of the Carolinas. Her parents, siblings, and friends all called her Velma. She was the second child, but the first daughter of farmer Murphy Bullard and his wife Lily. They had 9 kids all together. They had no electricity or running water. And Murphy's parents actually lived in the home with them along with his sister Susan. Susan was disabled because she actually had polio and her arm and leg had gotten shriveled. And at this point in life, Murphy found it impossible to make a living from the tobacco and cotton that he sold. As the Great Depression got worse, he worked as a logger in a sawmill. And this caused them to be able to move into a small house closer to town where child number 3 was born. Murphy then got a job in Fayetteville at a textile mill and moved back in with his parents. His father died shortly after, and his mother passed away less than a year after that. Murphy was very short-tempered and a heavy drinker. He hated to be smart-mouthed and he would get physically abusive. The oldest child, Olive, and the second oldest, Velma, were the ones who were kind of known for the back-talking to their father. However, Olive believed that Velma didn't get punished as much as he did, so it caused a lot of conflict between the two. He was convinced that their father favored Velma, and Velma was convinced that their mother favored Olive. However, Velma did not like their mother's submissive attitude towards Murphy. Decades later, in her memoirs, she wrote, "I seem to accept Daddy's high-tempered ways because I thought that's the way men are. Mamas should love their children and stand up for them, and Mama never stood up for me or any of us." Every time she got a beating, she was just as mad at her mother as she was at her father who had inflicted it. Lily even felt herself that she had to be super careful in her own home because she was afraid that she was going to set him off for something. And she was even beat at times because he was a super jealous man, but the thing is, he was very unfaithful to her. Velma started school at 7 years old in the fall of 1939. Velma loved it at first. She got good grades, she was complimented by teachers quite frequently. However, she wasn't the type to wear like those new, pretty store-bought dresses that all the other girls seemed to be wearing. She was made fun of for the plain lunches that pretty much just consisted of cornbread and a side of meat. She began sneaking off on her own to eat in private, and then she slowly began becoming more of a thief. She would steal coins from her father's pockets to buy candies at the store. She even stole $80 from their elderly neighbor. However, when Murphy found this out, he beat her long and hard with a strap, trying to cure her of the desire to steal. As she got older, she got more and more chores. She had to help out on the farm, she had to help care for her brothers and sisters, and she hated the work, but she didn't openly rebel because she was terrified of her father. I really never felt like my mama or daddy ever wanted me except for the work I did. I always felt that they just really wanted me to be a slave. There were some good times, however. Believe it or not, Murphy could be a loving father. He would take them on adventures. He would organize baseball games for like the community kids to come and play, and normally Velma was the only girl, but she really enjoyed playing shortstop. At 10 years old, she was walking past some shops with her dad and she saw this pretty dress in the window. It was pink with flowers, and to her surprise, he bought it for her. However, this daddy's girl title went a little too far, because apparently she told a reporter that her father had raped her and previously had felt her up. However, several siblings say that she's lying. In 1945, Murphy decided he wanted to go back to full-time farming. He bought more acres and a more modern home. After a year, however, he realized he couldn't support the family, so he went back to the mill. He later got a job at a textile plant in Red Springs, and they moved there. In high school, Velma no longer got good grades. Something she did enjoy at Parkton Public Schools was basketball, but her mother insisted that she quit the team because she just gave birth to twins and needed help with the housework. This made Velma very upset. But later on, she actually got a crush on this guy by the name of Thomas Burke. He was a year older than her. Thomas Burke was thin-faced, jug-eared, dark-haired, and he had a sense of humor. Velma told her dad that she wanted to see Thomas outside of school, but her father shut that down real fast, said hell no. He told her that she was not allowed to date until she turned 16, but once her 16th birthday came around, he still said no. After she begged him and pleaded, he finally said okay, but he set some very strict rules. Their dates usually had to be double dates, and she always had to be home by 10. Velma was 17 years old when Thomas proposed, and she said yes. They both quit school after getting married, and Thomas had like 3 different jobs to hold them up. He drove a delivery truck, he worked at a cotton mill, and he was a farm laborer. Velma also worked at a drugstore for a while, but Thomas made her quit because he didn't like her working outside of the home. They were living in the small Parkton home where her family once lived. In 1951, Velma got pregnant, and December 15th, she gave birth to Ronald Thomas. And then September 3rd, 1953, Kim was born. Velma adored her babies. She was protective of them and loved to read to them, and she wanted them to grow up as Christians, so she regularly took them to the Baptist church. When the kids started school, Velma was a very involved mother. She was known as like the grade mother for their classes. She was always available for field trips, and the kids kind of joked that she had automatic arms because as soon as anything was mentioned about a field trip, she raised her hand right away, like shot up like a dart, because she wanted to go on the field trip with them. Then she got another paying job, and this time Thomas did not object because they could use the extra cash. She worked midnight to 8 a.m. at the textile plant. Thomas began a job as a delivery driver for Pepsi Cola, and this got them enough money so that they could move into a more comfortable house in Parkton. In 1973, Velma started having some medical problems, so she actually had a hysterectomy, which wasn't a big deal to them because the 2 kids that they had were all that they really wanted. However, the surgery had a negative effect on her. She would either be depressed or nervous, and she often snapped. She feared that now that she couldn't have children and get pregnant, that she was less womanly, and she feared that her husband wouldn't find her as attractive. Then she began having more physical problems, specifically lower back pain. Thomas decided to join the JCs. Velma began resenting his evening absences and resented his drinking even more. She agreed with her church that alcoholic drinks were the devil's drinks. And she obviously got even more upset when she found out that he was going out with his male friends to have more drinks. In 1965, Thomas was in an accident while driving his Ford Galaxy. Supposedly the car left the highway, hit a culvert, flew into the air, landed in a driveway of a house, and he hit his head on the steering wheel and was knocked unconscious. He had a concussion, and from that point on, he suffered from severe headaches. He claims he was not drinking at that time, he was just super tired and fell asleep at the wheel. However, Velma did not believe him. Nearly every day, the couple would argue about alcohol. She would smell it on his breath, and then she would start an argument, and this really scared the children. And in 1967, Thomas was arrested for drunk driving. He lost his license and his job at Pepsi Cola, and this threw him into a depression, causing even more excessive drinking. The kids stopped having friends over because they really didn't want their friends to see how their parents were acting and how his father was constantly drunk and sleeping and causing arguments with Velma. The tension took a huge toll on Velma, and she was losing weight. And one day, Ronnie came home to find his mother passed out on the kitchen floor. He took her to the hospital, and doctors recommended that she stay for 1 week. She was given vitamins and sedatives before being released, and she was given a prescription for Librium. She started taking more medication than she was prescribed, and she started going to another doctor as well, who kept prescribing her Valium. Let's just say she did a lot of doctor shopping. She would go to one doctor without telling the other doctor that she went to, and she would just keep going back and forth between a bunch of different doctors without telling the other doctors that she was on certain medications, so she got a lot of different medications, and she mixed them all together, which should not have been mixed together. One day in April, their house caught fire, and Thomas was the only one home at the time. The kids were at school, and Velma said that she was at the laundromat when she came home to the house in flames. Thomas Burke had died of smoke inhalation. A few months later, Ronnie graduated high school as a salutatorian and in his speech paid tribute to his mother, who supposedly gave him all his best qualities. Then there was another fire at home, but luckily this time nobody was inside, but the house was completely destroyed. Velma moved them back in with her parents while she waited for the insurance money. Then, Velma began dating a widower by the name of Jennings Barfield. His wife actually passed away around the same time as Thomas had passed away, and he was also retired because he was struggling with a lot of health issues. He had diabetes, emphysema, and heart disease. And the two got married on August 23rd, 1970. They had their wedding at a church, and Velma moved in to their small house with his teenage daughter, Nancy. And one day he actually found her in a semi-conscious state and took her to the hospital. The doctor said that she had actually overdosed, and so the couple decided to separate for a little bit because he wanted her to promise that she was going to stop taking so many pills. And they eventually got back together once that happened. However, she broke her word and ended up back in the hospital. Jennings and Velma both told other people that their marriage had been a mistake. On March 21st, 1971, Jennings actually passed away from heart failure that he had been struggling with for quite a few years. After Jennings' death, Velma said, "I felt emptier and more depressed than ever. I kept going to my doctors. I had prescriptions from at least 2 and usually 3 doctors at a time. No matter how many pills any one doctor prescribed, they never lasted until time for the next refill." She worked at Belk's department store, however, her performance was negatively affected because of her drug dependency and just her mood swings. However, her boss was a sympathetic man, so he refused to fire her, but he did put her in the stockroom so she was away from customers and could kind of be by herself and not get snippy with people. And her behavior was also because of her separation from her son. The Vietnam War was happening, and so Ronnie felt it was only a matter of time before they ended up drafting him, so he decided to sign up. However, after Jennings' death, he started having second thoughts about that. Velma begged him to try to persuade the military that he had to stay home with his sick mom and couldn't be drafted. And even the doctors had wrote to the army saying that she, had drug abuse and all kinds of things and was pretty mentally unstable. However, that didn't work, so he was ordered to report to Fort Jackson, South Carolina. And guess what? Velma's house caught on fire again. By this time, she was hysterical. She and her daughter moved back in with her parents. She got fired from Belk's because she kept showing up late to her job, and when she was there, she was not doing her job. So she got fired, and this caused an even bigger depression. And then she found out that Murphy had lung cancer. He passed away at 61 years old. By this point, she's devastated. She's had 2 husbands die, and her father, and her son Ronnie could possibly get killed in Vietnam, and if that doesn't happen, he's planning to get married anyways, so she feels that she's going to lose her son no matter what. And she did not give them her blessing. "I've always been the most important woman in your life, and now you're going to have her, and you won't even want me to come around at all." He tried reassuring her that the heart he had for his future wife did not compare to the heart he had with her. In March of 1972, Velma got arrested for forging a prescription. She pled guilty and only got off with a suspended sentence and a fine. Ronnie also got discharged from the army. After their father's death, her and her mother were constantly arguing. Lily expected everything to be done for her, and Velma didn't want to be treated like a slave anymore. In the summer of 1974, Lily got sick. She had terrible stomach cramps, she was throwing up uncontrollably, and had really bad diarrhea. Doctors could not determine the cause, but Lily got better within a few days. On August 23rd, a man Velma was dating was killed in a car accident. He had made Velma the beneficiary of his life insurance policy, and she got a $5,000 check. And now Christmas has come around, and Lily got sick again. Same thing as last time, nauseous, vomiting, diarrhea. She also started throwing up blood. Velma called her brother Olive, and they called the ambulance for her, and she unfortunately passed away 2 hours later at the hospital. In early 1975, Velma was in trouble for writing a bad string of checks, and she was convicted of 7 counts of it. She was sent to prison for 6 months, but was only released after 3. This is when she started looking for jobs to care for elderly sick people. In 1976, she began living and caring for Montgomery and Dolly Edwards. Montgomery was 94 years old. He was bedridden, incontinent, diabetic, blind, and both of his legs were amputated. He also could not feed himself. Dolly was an 84-year-old cancer survivor. At first, Velma was happy to move in with this couple. They got along super great, and she also found a church that she liked. However, as the time went on, the tension grew more and more. Dolly thought that Velma was falling down on the job, and Velma thought that Dolly nitpicked everything she did. Montgomery died in January of 1977, and on February 26th, Dolly got sick. She told her stepson, Preston, that she thought she had the flu. She was weak and pale and had vomiting and diarrhea. She went to the hospital, but she was sent home the same day. However, the next day she took a turn for the worst and was back in the hospital, and then she died that evening. Then Velma began caring for another couple. John Henry Leigh was an 80-year-old farmer. His wife, Record, was a 76-year-old, and she had recently broken her leg. They gave Velma Sundays and Wednesday evenings off to go to church. Record liked to talk, which got on Velma's nerves, and the couple liked to argue quite a bit, which also got on her nerves a lot. And then there was a check that confused them. She knew she didn't sign it, but she was wondering who could have forged her name. The cops were called, but they weren't able to figure out what happened. On April 27th, John got sick, and he had all the same symptoms as everyone else. He gradually recovered and got released on May 2nd. However, throughout that month, he would keep getting sick. He would be fine, and then he'd get sick, and then he'd get better, and then he'd get sick. He ended up passing away on June 4th. Then Velma moved in with Roland Stewart Taylor. He was Velma's boyfriend and a relative of Dolly. Before Taylor became ill, Velma visited his daughter, Alice. She asked to see a picture that she had taken as a joke. It was known as his dead picture. He laid on the couch with his arms crossed over his chest, acting like he was dead. And he ended up dying February 3rd, 1978. And this is when they find out that all these victims had arsenic in their system. Supposedly, Velma confessed to Dolly's, Lily's, and John's deaths, but she was only convicted of Taylor's. So I didn't actually come out and say this, but if you didn't grasp what's going on here, is Velma's the one who poisoned all of these people. They weren't just getting sick because they ate something bad. They weren't just getting sick because there was something in the air. She was poisoning them somehow. So now we get into the trial. The prosecutor was Joe Freeman Britt. He was known as the world's deadliest prosecutor, and during a 17-month period, he prosecuted 13 first-degree murder trials and 1 convictions in all. The defense was Bob Jacobson. The defense said that Velma did not intend to kill her victims, only to make them ill so that she was able to cover up her theft by returning the money that she stole from her victims. She was tried for the death penalty. However, if the defense is true, then the death penalty wouldn't stand, because now instead of being tried for first-degree murder and convicted of first-degree murder, it would go to second-degree murder. The judge in this case was Henry McKinnon. He ruled that the evidence linking Velma to the other deaths be admitted, and the medical personnel also testified. Britt mentioned that the victims could have easily been saved if the antidote was given to them. And the only person who knew the antidote, because she was the only one who knew what these victims were given, was Velma. The defense asked the doctors about the effects of the various drugs that Velma had been taking. And some of the physicians that had testified were actually ones who had prescribed Velma these drugs. And the testimony showed that all these drugs taken together could most definitely cause an impaired kind of judgment and basically impaired her mind and brain. Jacobson put Velma on the stand to testify for herself, and she claims that she did not intend to kill her boyfriend, she just wanted to make him sick. She said she didn't tell the doctors what she had done because she didn't want to go back to prison. And she admitted to forging the checks because she was addicted to these drugs and couldn't afford the prescriptions. Overall, she claims that she didn't kill her victims, but they coincidentally all died after she poisoned them. Which, can I just say how stupid that sounds? I poisoned them, but they just happened to die because of it. I didn't mean to kill them, but they just happened to all die after I gave them this poison. And supposedly, Velma acted very cocky, snippy, and sarcastic during the trial, which was not a good look for her. The jury came back with the verdict of guilty of first-degree murder, and she was sentenced to death. And when sentenced, Velma was the only woman on death row in the state at the time. She was housed in the Central Prisons section for the more mental cases. This was where a lot of the assault inmates went and the people who are more prone to escape. And while she was at prison, she obviously went through a major withdrawal. She had no appetite, she had insomnia, nausea, cold sweats, splitting headaches, and she was given antidepressants and anxiety medications. Over a year, she gradually waned off of them. In her cell, she had pictures of her kids and grandkids and quotes that were more religious quotes. Her radio was usually tuned into a Christian station. However, she recognized that she was never really a true Christian. However, she eventually genuinely opened her heart, but many believed that this was really just an attempt to save her life. Velma also found meaning in her life by helping other prisoners. Many prisoners were actually illiterate, so Velma wrote them letters to help with that. And because of her death sentence, she wasn't technically supposed to have contact with others. Like, that was literally, like, there's a no contact rule. But a lot of the prison guards kind of turned a blind eye to that and thought that she would be perfect for helping other inmates. Many of you guys might know a lot about the law, even more than I do, but one thing I do know is that all death sentences get an automatic appeal. But in June 1990, hers was actually turned down. On September 17th, another appeal was turned down. Basically, over 6 years, several different appeals were filed and turned down, and then this means that the execution dates were set and then avoided and then set and avoided, and it was just an everlasting cycle for 6 whole years. Her kids also visited her throughout her stay, and Ronnie actually asked her if she killed their father. She said she probably did. She said that she thinks that he was drunk and asleep, and she had a cigarette or a match or something that she put at the foot of the bed and closed the door. I don't understand how you think you might have killed someone. The final appeal was filed October 30th, 1984. In her cell, she took a final communion, and her last words were, "I want to say that I am sorry for all the hurt that I've caused. I know that everybody has gone through a lot of pain, all the families connected, and I am sorry. And I want to thank everybody who has been supporting me all these 6 years. I want to thank my family for standing with me through all this, and my attorneys and all the support to me, everybody, and the people with the prison department. I appreciate everything, their kindness, and everything that they have shown me during these 6 years." Velma was escorted to a room where she was put to sleep and given poison to stop her heart. At 2:15 a.m. on November 2nd, 1984, Margie Velma Barfield had passed away. And when asked about her last meal, she wanted Coke and cheese doodles. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you liked it, give it a thumbs up. If you disliked it, give it a thumbs down. I don't really care. Subscribe if you're new. Comment down below videos you would like to see next. And I will see you guys in the next one. Bye!